All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Tim. I'm one of the pastors here at Island ECC, and it's so great to be here with you as we continue in this Cultivating Our City sermon series where we're looking at how we as human beings can go out into our city and love it well, but also be great contributors to our city too. Today we're looking at the idea of family matters. We're gonna dig into some family matters as people of God and people who are in families, but we're also gonna talk about how family matters. Family is very important to God and to our city and can help cultivate our city in a very special way. Now, we love the family here at Island ECC. I actually serve in our family ministry here at the church, working with our marriage and parenting courses and classes, so we have a lot of those things that come up throughout the year. And we also have a great children's ministry, preteen ministry, youth ministry. We try to cover all the bases with family because we love our kids, we love our children, we love our teens, we love our parents, our married couples, everything. We really try to serve the church as well as we can. And many of our people on our family ministry team have kids of their own, which is great because we can teach and learn from experience as we continue to serve our church in this way. And as a matter of fact, Gary, who's our leader of our preteens ministry, just had his third baby just not too long ago, a couple weeks ago. And it's his third baby girl, okay? And they gave her one of the greatest names I've ever heard ever for a daughter. Her name is Love. How great is that? Isn't that so sweet? Love is her name, third baby girl. And their other two girls are named Hope and Faith. How great is that, right? Like the Apostle Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians, these three remain, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. So I told Gary, be careful not to play favorites with Love. You know, she's the baby. She's going to get a lot of special attention. And Gary said, but Tim, don't you see how much I love the church with the way we named our kids? We have Hope of the City, Bold Faith, and Go Love, you know? I'm like, Gary, you're such a great team player. That's awesome. But we always love when babies are added to our church family because that means our ninth floor gets a little bit bigger and we get to love more kids here in our kids ministry. So it's always great when we see an influx of children. However, in our city of Hong Kong, we see that there's a little bit of an issue with that. That trend might be dying down, actually, because did you know that Hong Kong has the lowest fertility rate of any country in the entire world? We're the very, very lowest. Now, maybe you've heard about this, but it's true. We are the lowest. There was an article written earlier in the year about this that says, we don't need a baby, we have a cat. Hong Kong women say no to having children as experts scratch their heads as ways to reverse the trend. And so this is something that's puzzling and troubling for a lot of experts because, you know, to continue to rebuild the population, to keep the population even, you have to have 2.1 fertility rate, and Hong Kong is at 0.8, or 0.8 fertility rate. Other countries around Asia, like South Korea, 0.9. Singapore is at 1 and Japan is at 1.3. So we're pretty low, we're very low in that way. And so a lot of experts are worried and concerned, but these women would say in this article that, you know, the competitive nature of Hong Kong, the expenses that it costs to raise a child, and the lack of infrastructure and childcare for working moms are some of the reasons not to have a kid, so they just got a cat and they're happy with their cat. And so we see a lot of this trend happening where people aren't childless, they're child-free. They don't want to have kids because it's so stressful and there's so much stress of having children, and it's getting to be pretty expensive. Now, Hong Kong, as you probably know and may have heard, is trying to help that, and they're offering what they call a newborn baby bonus. So for everybody who has a child now, you get $20,000. Pretty great. When I heard this news, I asked my wife, do you want to have a fourth kid? We get $20,000, we could do, that'd be great, right? She said no. Because it would be a little bit more expensive to raise the child. But you know, other countries are doing this as well. South Korea is offering $12,000. Japan is offering monthly assistance to people who have kids. Singapore is offering $64,000 for your first child, and then $75,000 for every subsequent child. And so I think a lot of married couples are here kind of contemplating, yeah, we should move to Singapore. We've been thinking about it, now it's time to move. But what we're seeing here is that there's a little bit of a panic going on that we need to, you know, increase children in our population, in our world, to continue our society. Because it's gonna have economic impacts, it's gonna have societal impacts, And so what we see is that even the government cares about the family. We care about the family as a church, but even our government cares about the family. And in this article that I just showed, Professor Paul Yip Sufai, he's a population growth expert in the University of Hong Kong. It says this, says, family is the basic unit of society. And when that unit is shaken, the overall social well-being and subsequently the harmonious atmosphere will be impacted. So we see that the family is our basic unit of society. That is the most important unit of society, that it is what helps our communities grow, and the government needs to care for the cities, and that's what a lot of people are screaming. Our government needs to care for the families, and a lot of people are screaming, care for us, help us, give us childcare, give us daycare, give us things that would help us to have more kids, and then we will have kids. But what we see is that the government is even saying that family matters. Family is important for us. Family is important to our city. It's what will help cultivate our city. It's what will help grow our city. It's how we are able to share love in our city. So we're going to focus on the family today and talk a little bit more about how our families can have a major impact in our city. Now, I recognize right off the bat, some of us here aren't having a family right now. Maybe you're single. Maybe you're not married in some way, okay? So maybe you've come here today and you say, well, Tim, I'm not married, so how's this gonna pertain to me? Don't worry, I'm gonna cover that base as well. But I just wanna say to our singles in this room, before Pastor Kevin was leading our young adults ministry, I also led our young adults ministry and would do dating classes and all those sorts of things. And I would encourage our couples here, or our singles here, to start trying to find someone to date. It's really great. One of the main things that I heard from single people when doing young adults ministry is that it's really hard to find a Christian boyfriend or girlfriend. And let me tell you right now, there are so many Christian potential boyfriend and girlfriends in this place right here, right now, in this church. So while many of you are swiping right and swiping left on an app, all you have to do is look right or look left. They're here. I promise you they're here. I love it when we get couples together in this church. As a matter of fact, there's a couple that started from the meet and greet here. One guy met a woman and they got married at the meet and greet. It is possible, okay? I encourage you to do that. They're great, great singles here in the church. And as Pastor Brett always reminds us, if anything happens and you don't make it, there's multiple floors and multiple services. You never have to see each other again, okay? But we want to encourage you to start looking and to start thinking about it. But I do recognize that maybe you're not married and you don't have kids, and so that's probably not the place you are right now for this particular message, but I want to encourage you in this way to know that we care for you and that we're here for you. And also recognize that there are other people in different situations that maybe have been divorced or remarried or widowed, and we do care for you as well. We have support groups in those ways as well here at the church. And so we want to encourage our church in all aspects, because we know that this is not an easy thing, and that's exactly why we're talking about it here today. But the first part of our family unit we need to realize is that every single one of us are children. We have been a child in a family in some way, shape, or form, maybe an adoptive family or a nuclear family, immediate family, or a family that we were raised by grandparents or aunties and uncles or things like that. So we were children, and we are commanded as children to honor your father and mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord is giving you. Now, this is written in Exodus, where they were on their way to the promised land, but this is saying the way to live as a child is to honor your father and mother. So if you're not attached to any kind of marriage relationship or anything like that, what your job is to be a child, is to honor your mother and father. And I think Hong Kong does that so well. You know, I'm come from the States, and we don't see this kind of circle of life family support that usually happens here. And I meet a lot of couples that are supporting their parents, which I think is a beautiful act of honoring your father and mother. Now, this may be easier said than done for some people. Maybe it's a little bit tougher in your family to feel like doing this, but this is a command that's given to all of us as human beings to do this for our parents, even if we don't feel like it. Even if we don't think they deserve it, because as Christians, we're called to love no matter what, to love unconditionally. But when we think about our family unit, when we think about being children in our family, what happens to us as we're growing is we're being instilled with family values, family traditions, family culture. We're getting all of this poured into us. And on top of the fact that God has made us. He's knitted us together in our mother's womb. We have a unique personality and a unique style. We also have this amalgamation of what we've received from our parents and our family unit. And then we grow and we become an adult, and then we go out into the world, and then we encounter another person who has that same background, has been infused with their own family background. And we get this clash of cultures in this beautiful, amazing, crazy way where couples come together and all of a sudden these family units collide and they start their own family. But one of the hard parts about that is a lot of couples are not prepared for this. They're not prepared for what they're getting themselves into, and so they don't do their due diligence entering into marriage, and sometimes that can be very hard. Oh, and on top of all of that, we're sinners. We are sinful people who marry another sinner, and then we begin to go, what's wrong with us? Why are we having problems in our marriage? And so what ends up happening is maybe couples will end up separating or struggling and having really, really hard times. And this is a tale as old as time. And in Jesus' day, this was brought to his attention as well. And we read in Matthew chapter 19, it says, the Pharisees came up to him and tested him by asking him, is it lawful to divorce one's wife for any cause? Now, this was a debate among the Pharisees about Deuteronomy chapter 21. And when it talks about that in Deuteronomy chapter 21, what we were seeing is that there was this idea of how to deal with someone who has been indecent. Maybe your spouse was indecent and they were trying to interpret the word indecency. Was that a sexual indecency or was it some other kind of indecency that could mean kind of anything? So they're asking, can we divorce for any cause, any reason? Now, is it one reason or is it multiple reasons? Well, what I love about Jesus' answer, because he knew what they were doing to him, was he went straight to scripture. He says, have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female? So he's talking about God creating Adam and Eve, male and female. And then he says this, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let man not separate. So he's basically saying you're asking the wrong question. We shouldn't try to divorce for any reason. We should say, this is what God is bringing together. This is what God is joining together. Man is not joining this couple together. God is joining this together. And another key thing to notice is that we are to leave our family and start another family. And we're going to talk about this idea of mutual love and respect to one another, but this is where parents give the respect to their kids to say, go and be your own family, and to give space and boundaries to that. Because this is what God is saying that we should do, go and start our own family and have the respect to one another as we have with our parents. But again, we're saying this is what God is joining together as a married couple. And this is why marriage is so special. It's so holy. It's set apart. It is a sacred bond between a man and a woman. It's not just a flippant decision. And this is why we work so hard with couples in premarital counseling and other styles of counseling to help couples see what they need to see before they get married. We really try to serve our church as well as we can with that to encourage them in this way. Because a lot of people don't really think through all of the things that are going to happen. What they do is they get to their wedding ceremony and they share vows with one another. They share vows with one another, not thinking about exactly what they're saying when they say these vows. Now think about it. Whenever you get married, the minister will stand in front of you and ask you, do you want to marry this person? And ask the other person, do you want to marry this person? And you both say two words. You say, I do. And do you realize what you're saying when you say, I do? You're opening yourself to an entire world of possibilities that's going to happen whenever you enter into this marriage. All kinds of chaos and amazement and happiness and sadness is going to ensue just from two little words. It's kind of like when you do the terms of service agreements on different apps and software, right? You just click, yeah, I agree. Not knowing that you just give Facebook your entire life. You know, they can do anything with your data. It's kind of the same thing when you get married. You say, I do. And now you've given your spouse your entire life, and they can do anything with that data. They can do anything with you in that course, in that case. And so when we get married, we say these vows, and we're not fully all the time thinking about what am I saying I do to? But what we need to realize is that vows are not just between us and our spouse, it's between us and God. And we're telling God, I do to this person. I want to marry this person. And so what we do know about any relationship, it doesn't have to be marriage, it can be coworkers, it can be anything, is that there are highs and lows and ups and downs. There's always gonna be that case. It's always gonna be a roller coaster no matter what. But what I think is so amazing is that at the very beginning of our marriage, we say for better or worse. We say for better or worse. And we're saying at the very beginning, I know it's going to get worse. I mean, it's not a fun thing to say at your wedding, but you're saying it. Richer or poorer, sickness and health. We're saying, I know it's gonna get hard. And I'm saying yes anyway. I'm saying I do, even though I know it's gonna get hard. But subsequently, what happens is after you say yes to that and this euphoria of your wedding day, we're so excited and we're having a great time and nobody's thinking about hard things and bad things. You begin to think about, wait, are we really in love? If we hit a bump in the road, are we really in love? I mean, I don't feel it anymore. Because a lot of times when we get together in a relationship, maybe every single time, there is this euphoric state, this happiness, this joy, this love is blind type of idea that happens when we meet each other and we're just in love. We're so in love. And it's amazing. You can't see any flaws in the other person. You can't see anything that's wrong with the other person. You just think love is gonna conquer all. It's gonna be amazing. I remember when my wife and I, we started dating very young. We met each other very young. But I remember the first time I held her hand. We were just talking with each other. We were just hanging out. And there was something that came over me and says, I need to hold her hand. I really want to hold her hand. And I was building up the courage to do it. And I was like, okay, you can do this, you can do this. And I just reached over and I grabbed her hand. Very weird, but I just did it. And when I did it, like sparks flew and fireworks were in the sky and the heavens opened up and God said, this is my, no, he didn't say no. But I was so excited when this happened. It was amazing. But also, I know that my hands sweat when I'm nervous. And I was just praying, God, please don't let my hands sweat while I'm holding her hand. And I noticed that my left hand stayed dry, but my right hand was soaking wet. So God answered that prayer. That was the first time we held hands. Now, after 24 years of marriage, we still hold hands, but it doesn't happen like that anymore. Sparks don't fly like that. You know, maybe we hold hands walking through the mall, or maybe we're holding hands as I'm dragging her out of the mall, like let's get out of here, or something like that. But the truth is that this being in love thing is sometimes just a misconception about relationships because we think it has to stay like that all the time. And if it doesn't, then we're in trouble. And something must be wrong. Even though we said for better or worse, even though we knew worse times were coming, we feel, well, I don't feel it anymore. But you know, the Apostle Paul, who is great in this whole area, really helps us understand what love truly is. Because if this is the wrong way of thinking about love, he tells us the way that we should love one another. And he says this, love is patient and kind. It does not envy or boast. It's not arrogant or rude. It does not insist in its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. The key here is that love does things. Love is an action. We are to love one another with action. We are to go love our spouse. This is how we should love one another. That if we don't feel like it, we should do it anyway. Because love is patient and kind. Even if we're not feeling like we're in love, even if we're at a for worse moment, we are pushed as Christian believers to love our spouse, even if we don't feel like it. It's not irritable or resentful. It doesn't rejoice at wrongdoing. It endures all things. And it endures those for worst moments. So this feeling of being in love is just a fairy tale. It's what we see in the movies. It does go away, and it comes back in cycles, that romantic love. But the feeling of doing love, the action of doing love, is something that we can do every single day. without fail. We can always, always love each other very well. Now, I remember when Cindy and I first got married. We'd been married for less than a year, and we were in a Bible study with a great mentor couple, this sweet, sweet couple. They were grandparents. They had been married for a long time. They were a great Christian example of what true love is and what a good spiritual life could be. And I remember the wife telling us, she says, I love my husband, but sometimes I hate my husband. And that blew my mind that this beautiful Christian woman could hate her husband. How is that possible? But she just said, but I still love him even when I hate him. And so meaning like he could rub me the wrong way and make me very angry, but I love him through that. I do the action of love to continue to love this person. And so we think about getting married and we think about being with this person for life, and we go, well, I just want to marry someone who's got it all together and all figured out. And we look for the perfect one. We look for the one who's going to check all the boxes and who's going to be the perfect person on our list that we have. But the truth is that when we marry someone, we're always marrying a sinner and an imperfect, incomplete person. And in this phenomenal book, The Meaning of Marriage, written by Tim and Kathy Keller, they share some great wisdom. And I encourage any married couple to read this book. It's a fascinating book. But Kathy, Tim Keller's wife, has this great quote where she says, most people, when they're looking for a spouse, are looking for a finished statue when they should be looking for a wonderful block of marble. Not so you can create the kind of person you want, but rather because you see what kind of person Jesus is making. So I want all the married couples here to look to your spouse and say, you are a wonderful block of marble. Thank you. I just want you to remind each other that you're not finished just yet. But also want our spouses to remind themselves, it's not my job to chisel you into that statue. It's God's job to do that, and I get to be a part of it. And that's what Tim, Kathy's husband, says. Within this Christian vision of marriage, here's what it means to fall in love. It's to look at another person and get a glimpse of what God is creating and to say, I see who God is making you, and it excites me. I want to be a part of that. I want to partner with you and God in the journey you are taking to his throne. And when we get there, I will look at your magnificence and say, I always knew you could be like this. I got glimpses of it on earth, but now look at you. So when we look at our spouses, we're not seeing the complete picture. That's only going to be in heaven. But when we look at each other here on earth, we get glimpses of that. We get to see potential what our spouses can be. And that's exciting. And that we are to encourage one another as spouses to help each other grow in this relationship with God, because as we grow towards God, we grow towards each other. Now, one other book, which is kind of a classic marriage book for us Christians, is this one called Sacred Marriage, written by Gary Thomas. And in this book, he talks about the idea that marriage can be tough, but it is molding us to become more holy. And he says, what if God designed marriage to make us holy more than to make us happy? So again, when a lot of couples hit bumps in the road and they feel like, well, I'm just not in love anymore, I'm just not happy, they jump ship and they say, I can't do this anymore. And it gets to be a challenge. But what Gary's saying is that this is to help make you be a holy person, to help you grow in your relationship with God as a spouse. He's got this quote too. It says, if you want to be free to serve Jesus, there's no question, stay single. This is what the Apostle Paul talks about as well. He says, but marriage takes a lot of time. If you want to become more like Jesus, I can't imagine any better thing to do than to get married. Being married forces you to face some character issues you'd never have to face otherwise. When we're not together with a spouse, we have blind spots and we don't see them. And we go about our lives not noticing. But a spouse is very much like a mirror. And a lot of us don't like looking in mirrors because our mirrors show us all of our flaws. And so we try to avoid mirrors. But your spouse is just right there saying, nope, let me show you this, and I'm gonna show you this, and I'm gonna point out that, and I'm gonna point out that. Now, that's not to hurt us. That's not to say that I'm trying to put you down, even though it can sometimes be done maliciously. As a Christian, the idea is that we are to encourage one another. We're to admonish one another. We are to help one another see the blind spots that we can't always see. And so this is what that relationship is. It's to be this mirror to us, to help us to understand who we are and what God is making us. And so all of these things that we do these for better or worse words, and we say these things to build our relationship and strengthen our relationship. And again, sometimes it can be very hard, but we can get through it to continue to love one another. But how can we do this? How can we live in a harmonious way in our marriage, fighting through the hardships, fighting through the hard times? Well, again, the Apostle Paul gives us great wisdom in this. And we see this in the book of Ephesians, chapter 5, which is a great, great passage on Christian households. He says this, first of all, he starts off the passage saying we are to be submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. And I just want to read what he says right before that. He says, to all Christians, to every one of us, regardless of our relationship status, be filled with the Spirit, addressing one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody to the Lord. Some of those it's easier for this to do than others, but we are to be singing songs to one another with all of our heart, giving thanks always and for everything to God the Father. Giving thanks to God in everything that we do, and we are to be submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. Meaning that we revere Christ and what he did for us and his sacrifice for us. He submitted himself to us. He came on this earth and humbled himself to serve us. Therefore, out of reverence for that, we submit to one another. That we think of others higher than ourselves. That is the way to live as a Christian. And that is still, in 2023, a countercultural way to live. To elevate others above yourselves. To love your neighbor as yourself. But that's what we're called to do. So that's setting the stage here for what Paul goes into with wives and husbands. He says this to wives, wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. Now, the original Greek doesn't have this word submit, because it's in the context of what he's talking about. He's saying submit to one another out of reverence to Christ. And he says, wives, to your own husbands as to the Lord. So wives, submit to your husbands. He mentions it in Colossians chapter 3 as well, that wives are to submit to their husbands. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself its Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands. And so what we're seeing here is this Christian picture of marriage. That, again, it's saying that we submit to one another, wives submit to your husbands. Husbands are also to submit to their wives as Christian men as well, as we submit to one another. But this is showing the order of the family as God has intended for us, that Jesus is the head of the church and the husband is the head of the household, and therefore wives are to respect and love their husband in that way. In submission in that way. Now, a lot of husbands, a lot of men stop at this verse right here. and they kind of get really excited because it says, honey, the Bible tells you to submit to me. The Bible, Jesus, God said this. We should be doing this, right? But what Paul goes on to give the husbands is an even greater responsibility, an even more challenging responsibility. He says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. We know how Jesus sacrificed his life to the point of death for the church. And therefore, husbands are supposed to love their wives in a similar way, sacrificing everything for them. That he may sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. So this is showing a major responsibility for the husbands, that we are to love our wives in a very sacrificial way, to think of her before anything else, to prioritize her. And a lot of couples struggle with this because we get into our selfish nature. And if the husband doesn't love the wife the right way, the more respectful way, then the wife won't respect the husband. And then vice versa. And it goes in a cycle. And there's a great book written about this called Love and Respect. It's a wonderful book. But this cycle continues until someone decides, I am going to take the action of loving my spouse and I'm going to break the cycle. And then a good cycle can begin. But we see that this is what we're called to do, this mutual act of submission to one another. that we think of each other higher than ourselves and we don't take things too personally, we don't get too worked up on things, but we just love one another through those storms. And so this is what we're called to do. This is how we live in harmony with one another as a married couple, that we just love and respect each other. And we do that dance and we do it well. So now, as this couple loves one another very much, the family grows. And children are then added to families, and again, in various ways. It could be through birth or through adoption, but children come into our family in various ways, and the family begins to grow. And we know that God thinks very highly of children. Children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb, a reward. And for our grandparents here, grandchildren are the crown of the aged. How beautiful is that? That there's a crown for you. But now Paul, in Ephesians, he continues on in chapter 6, speaking to children. And he says this, he says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. He quotes the commandment. This is the first commandment with a promise that it may go well with you, that you may live long in the land. So we are to honor our parents as children and our children to honor us as parents. You see the whole circle of life completing at that point. But what I find interesting is that of course we know that. And when our kids are young, they love to love us. They love to respect us. Our kids are so sweet when they're young. And some of my favorite memories are when I would come home from work and I'd open the door and my kids would just come running up to me and jumping on me and hugging me. I loved it every single day. I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to open the door for that to happen. Now with teenagers, that doesn't happen anymore. It just doesn't happen. My dogs do that, but my kids don't do it. So I wish that could happen again. But what I see now in the teenage years is that it has to be a mutual submission. There has to be a love and respect between parents and children, and it has to go both ways. And Paul even talks on that. He says, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. So he's saying, don't be overbearing on your kids. Don't put too much pressure on them. Don't invoke them to anger. Don't do these things. They have enough stress as it is on their own. And when they hit puberty and go through adolescence, it becomes even more crazy. And they're trying to find their identity and trying to find who they are. But we still see our sweet little 13-year-old as a sweet little 3-year-old. And our 13-year-old is going, I can't wait to get out of this house and be an adult. And we have differing perspectives. And so there we have to find this mutual love and respect for our kids. They respect us and we respect them. Now, of course, there has to be boundaries and discipline and all those sorts of things. Pastor Rick right now is leading a class on discipline upstairs. You just missed it, but he'll do it again, I promise. But the key here is that we have to live in this harmonious way of mutual submission, even to our children, that we listen to them and we honor them as well, setting up the right kind of boundaries and the right kind of training. Now, of course, we are the parents, and as long as they live under our roof, we kind of set the rules and those sorts of things. And so we need to set up boundaries and have good, wholesome parenting and God-honoring parenting to them. And we have to help work with them in their lives to grow to be great human beings and great Christians. Now, I want to say, as a church, like I said, we love the family, and we serve the family in all aspects of every age and stage. But I want to also encourage our parents to say, don't put that responsibility just on us because it starts in the home. It's more important in the home to build this there, your values and traditions and your love for God there, and your disciplines and your discipleship and your devotions there, than it is just to drop your kids off and say, let the church do it. It has to be a 1-2 thing. That's why we have this orange curriculum, which is yellow and red make orange, which is home and church make this orange thing, right? And so that's what we do to serve our church, and we want you to serve your kids in that as well. Remembering that we train up a child in the way he should go, and even when he's old, he will not depart from it. And we start them off the right way, and when they're older, they won't depart from it. And I had just a fantastic conversation with my daughter last week. She's 18 years old now, she's an adult, she's in university, she's kind of striking out on her own at this point. Of course, we're there for her all the time, no matter what. But we were talking, and she was telling us about a really hard conversation that she had recently where values were brought up. And she talked about, well, in my family, these were the values that we had, and she stuck to her guns. And I was really proud to hear her say that she was so thankful for what she had in our family that helped mold her mind and shape her heart in this way that she could stand up for what she believed in. And so I think that's an encouraging thing. Now, believe me, tons of mistakes in the Latour household that have been made. We all make tons of mistakes. That's why I keep going to these parenting classes myself to learn more about how to be a better parent. But these things, this is what we should be doing as parents, is setting them off on the right course. So to sum up, very, very simple applications here of how we can, as families, cultivate our city. And again, everybody here is in some sort of family, whether it's a child-parent relationship, a marriage relationship, or a parent relationship. We're all in some way, shape, or form able to help cultivate our city. So very simply, first, as a child, love and respect your parents. Listen to them, obey them, honor them, serve them, be there for them. And I see even, again, as adults here in Hong Kong, it is such a beautiful thing that adult children serve their parents very well. So love and respect your parents. As a married person, love and respect each other. Love and respect your spouse. The marriage is the heart of the family unit. And if a marriage is healthy, then everything else will be healthy. And it will continue to grow from there. So love and respect one another in this way. And then also as a parent, love and respect your kids. Love and respect your kids. Know that they are going to become their own individuals, that God has made them who they are and very unique, and they are going to grow into this person, and you've done the best you can, but at one point they will be adults, and it is time to let them be adults. And I know that's hard for us as parents, but we have to do that. Now, I know everything I've talked about today is easier said than done. And believe me, we've all been there. I've been there. And it's very hard to navigate these relationships every single day. It's a very big challenge. And again, this is why I say we are here as a church to help that as best as we can, trying to cover all of these bases to serve our people in our church. Now, last week we did a church survey. And with that church survey, we found out a lot of information. And one of the things I found out is I know where you all live now, okay? Because you told us. You said on this map, I live here and here and here and here, okay? We didn't get addresses, but we know an idea where you live. Now that we know that our whole church is spread throughout this entire city, even into China and Macau and other places. So we know that our church is all around the city. And so that's really special because we know that you're in all these different districts and your homes are in these different districts. And as you love your family, you love your community, you serve your community, it's very, very great to see that our church is everywhere. And your heart will grow in that place that you are, and your family will grow in that place you are, and you will make an impact. And what I love so much is meeting families here at our church that have invited other families to different events, or this is my friend from my building, or this is my friend from work, or whatever. And we see that the heart is growing. That home is where the heart grows and expands around our city and begins to cultivate our city through the family unit. You know, kids have a very powerful effect on other kids. They'll invite their friends to anything. And so if they say, hey, come to my church, their kids are like, okay. And then the parents come along, and it's really, really great to see that. So our home is where our heart grows, and it can really reach out into our city. And we know that where love resides, cities thrive. Where love resides in these different places, our city will thrive. So my encouragement for all of us as we go out into this city is to love each other with love and respect in your family units, to know that it's a very important aspect of our society. Because we're just here in this one spot in Quarry Bay, but I know our church expands all throughout the city. And so continue to be these hearts all over the city and go love our city in this way. Let me pray for us. God, I thank you so much for our families. I thank you that we're in your family and what the picture of a family is. Lord, we praise you that we are your children. We praise you that we're fearfully and wonderfully made and that you care for us and love us deeply. And I pray that as we grow in our lives and grow as Christians, that we would encounter other believers, other people that we get connected to, maybe in a marriage relationship. God, I pray that those types of things, those types of relationships would expand and amplify love in our city. And God, we see that the marriage is a picture of Christ's love for the church, that we are the bride of Christ as a church. And I pray, God, that we would continue to be that picture for the world around us, that as husbands and wives, that we would love each other well to show the power of Christ. And God, as parents, I pray that we would love our children well and to not put too much pressure, but to help them to grow in great stature, to help them to grow and be encouraged, and to be good followers of Christ, good people, kind-hearted, loving, and caring. So God, I thank you for the power of love in this room, in this church. I thank you for the power that we have to be able to do this as families, that we can really change our city by loving each other inside our home. God, we thank you and we pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.